right, welcome, blockheads. It is March 13th, 2024. It is 9:30 a.m. East Coast of the United States. This is episode 71 of Business on the Bloc, Fake News, AI, and Blockchain. Today, we're going to unravel the chaos of AI-generated news stories and the dispute over how to best solve this. We'll also update you on the coming battle between traditional finance and DeFi blockchains. So this podcast today, anyway, will be the intersection of technology, media, and ethics. And this is about the battle for central control and individual freedom as it goes digital. Business on the Block comes to you weekly. It is the three of us. I'm joined by my co-host, Michelle Peterson-Clark.
Hi, everyone.
And Mike Neubauer.
Hello, hello.
The purpose of this podcast, and I'm Mark Angelos, by the way. The purpose of this podcast, we're supposed to bring to you insight on the digital media revolution, how blockchain, AI, and the developing technologies in the digital space can be used in everyday business. This is intended to be an intentional business conversation without the get-rich-quick stuff. All right. So before we jump into the stories, my lovely co-host would like to say a quick word about a rebrand that's happening that we wanted to make you guys aware of.
Thank you. So as I predicted last week, does that mean I get a tick for one for a prediction that came true? As I predicted last week, on Friday, on International Women's Day, I announced that I was abdicating my throne as the content marketing queen. And I have lent into my Instagram handle that I've had for many, many years called Excellence Takes Courage. And basically what I'm going to do is help women over 40, mostly those that have children, lead a better, more fulfilled, more happy, more productive lives. So things like if they want to study or if they want to, change their, do some personal development, or if they want to start a business. So will still be doing marketing. So we can still say that I'm doing marketing for this section of the thing, but I'll just be the former content marketing queen instead of the current content marketing queen. And if you go to excellencetakescourage.com, I have started a Substack weekly newsletter. And so at the moment you go there, I'm still building the website. So I did Ready, Fire, Aim. Wasn't 100% finished, but I aimed to launch on International Women's Day on Friday, and I did. So
congratulations.
That's where I am. Thanks.
We back you as a member of the show, as always, as a friend. And as long as you don't abdicate your tinfoil crown for the conspiracy corner, we're cool. I'm going to take us into story number one. First story, proliferating news sites spew AI-generated fake stories. This is coming off Yahoo. So basically, AI-powered news outlets have cropped up now. They're fueling an explosion of what they call, quote, false narratives. And hundreds of websites are churning out tech-enabled fiction that's masquerading as news daily. Separate from this is a story we'll attach coming to us from payments.com. Adobe Microsoft lead coalition to source the origin of AI content. So this is another story separate from this, saying that there basically is a coalition of large tech powerhouses like Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, coming up with ways to detect synthetic media. And then finally, the third piece that we will pair with that is story out of Reuters. Elon Musk makes XAI open source. And the reason we're connecting this is because Musk has posted he's going to give the public free access to experiment with the code behind the technology of his AI. So these are competing ways of, if you will, regulating fake news. You can either try to have centralization where they tell you what's good or not, or you can have Musk's goal of let it go run, crazy and see what happens. Anyway, we're going to get some comment out of this. Michelle, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you. Fake news, AI, and blockchain, we've discussed this previous, but right now it's becoming a central theme in the mainstream media. What do you think? What should we be doing? And what should people know?
So I think, when we first started talking about AI, when ChatGPT launched, people were, the emphasis was on, oh no, I'm going to lose my job. it's going to be able to write content and do things, and this is bad for employment and industry, and our contractors who write for a living, or make digital pictures for a living, or are graphic designers, that everyone's going to lose their job. And there was that really big fear factor in the beginning. Now we're getting to the point where, while some of that has happened, people have started to realize that, like, you can tell the content now that's written by a non-human. So even though that's still happening, obviously, as part of this story shows, people are not as fearful anymore, but they're fearful about something else now. And what they're fearful about now is, am I reading something that's actually true? And that is getting harder and harder and harder to work out and to know. And the problem we've got, and this article shows for us, is that even if things ultimately get taken down or called out as being false, when you've been shared 10 million, 20 million, 80 million times, there's a big problem, because it's out there and it's out there to stay. And there'll be a number of people who will never look at the stuff that tells them it isn't true. They'll read it, they'll think it's true, and that will be their opinion, and that will be it. And I think that's the problem we're up against right now.
Mike, what do you think? Is this something that is this being blown out of proportion, first of all, or do you think this is something that we need?
No. This is not being blown out of proportion. This is a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. In a digital sense, which can ultimately lead to real world consequences. And we're seeing that with, a lot of the things that Michelle had described. The problem, I guess, with a lot of this content, it's designed to reflect on user behavior. Our user behavior in today's day and age is very lazy, right? You read headlines, you read a couple sentences in a paragraph, and you think you know what's going on. The other side of this is the journalism component has morphed into an opinion piece than it has actual news. So we are now leveraging the ability of what's real or what's not real. There's still a very much of a human error element in real content. So the blame can't all be put on AI generated content and what's out there. The problem is now you have this mix of everything. And we still have the user behavior of being lazy and reading headlines and thinking that we know everything. But ultimately, this is going to lead to catastrophic consequences. There's a few documented initiatives of what was going on in the Cold War about he said, she said moments. There's movies that have been generated where, people are given false information that ultimately could have led to a catastrophic world war or atomic bomb that's dropped. These are real things that could potentially go down, assuming, of course, that, this information circulating, regardless on how many times it gets shared, if it has the attention of people, and that is all of a sudden the way that, let's just call it governing bodies or global enterprises conduct their actions, there's going to be consequences that we will not be able to come back from. So where does all this end up? This is something that needs to have a validation and a verification process. This, linking all these stories together, where does it get sourced from? What is the new IP address that we're talking about when it comes to open source AI or any AI generated content?
So the two theories, though, Mike, I'm going to take issue with one of your topics there. People are lazy, and I agree with you that it's headline reading only. But I also think that the younger generation is less susceptible to that than we give them credit for. Meaning the folks that used to trust your parents would trust, Dan Rather and Walter Cronkite to tell them, or your grandparents. These kids today, they're not believing any of what Joe Rogan's up to talking about aliens, and they laugh because they know. So, but I will say this though, what do we want to do about this? Is the answer that we should be collating into one centralized place what is the truth and what isn't, right? AI has to be vetted. Or is it let everyone do their own AI thing, like Elon's proposing? You can just have the open source version of this and make your own truth. Like the truth will come out over time, if you will.
Well, okay, so what you just said, and you corrected yourself, make your own truth. The reality is there should be one truth.
But here's the thing. If my own truth is, racism is good, and your own truth is racism is bad, then over time that plays out. like reality emerges.
That's an opinion. That's not truth.
I agree.
When I was growing up, my dad used to say, "There's your version of the truth and my version of the truth, and the
That's always
actual
been.
truth somewhere in the middle."
That's what I'm getting at.
Well, there's
you
two
never
sides
get
to
to
every
that middle
story, and then
truth.
there's the truth, right?
But you never get to that middle truth if you don't
But how
let
do you
it all
know
out.
what that truth necessarily is? Because everybody comes at the truth from their lens. So
It's a
when your
perspective.
lens
You're right.
is, yes.
But do I want Mark Zuckerberg telling me what the truth is?
Again, it's a matter
Or
of where
Elon.
you're able to source out that type of information. I think, look, regardless on Walter Cronkite or what it was like, quote unquote, back in the day, there was still a perception on what really went down. Now, you might have preconceived perceptions before reading an article, or you might be, leaning one way or another, depending on what your knowledge or interest is on that particular topic anyway. But again, these kids might realize that, or at least the younger generations might realize that what they see at 6 o'clock on the television is mostly biased or prepared content to fuel something. They're still not reading articles all the way through. And that's why you see people who actually do and call out some of these BS articles. The nuts and bolts of the actual truth is buried 75 paragraphs within the article.
You say 6 o'clock news, Mike, but I'm talking the 6-second clip on TikTok. Like there's no.
Yeah, I would argue
news.
that they're never watching the 6 o'clock news, and if it's not on YouTube or Twitch or TikTok, then they don't necessarily know about it.
So
I'm
I want
not
to give a little more.
They do. I'm just saying that they don't trust it.
Here's a little more context for the audience. The story out of payments discusses how Adobe, Microsoft are putting together a coalition to source the origin of AI content. They want to be able to prove to you that content was legit or not. So the companies behind this coalition, the first one is Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and IBM. There is a separate, completely different coalition, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. That's run by Adobe, Microsoft, and Google also. So my point is that the American big tech scene is building the verification tools for what truth is in news. Is that concerning?
Absolutely. 100%. This is the new version of I guess what do they call it? The fact checkers that social media hired back in 20. Yeah. So this is straight out of 1984, right? So you slap another label on it to verify the crap that you're swinging anyway, and people are expected to buy into it. Look, as more and more of these things surface, and again, as more of these AI deep fake stories, which again could have real world implications, start to come about and prove our prediction from earlier or from late last year on how this is all going to play out, we're going to start to see a shift in the monetization effort from data collection to where the source of a lot of this AI generated content is coming from. Because if you can tap into that source, you could tap into the language model that it learned from while generating that source. And if that holds the ability to provide either A, more accurate information, or B, more information that people are susceptible to digesting and engaging with, that's going to be the new data, the data mining that these companies are going to go after.
So define that, Mike. You're saying they're going to data mine. How do I make money if I'm not selling? It's not from the sale of data anymore. How is it?
So if I'm generating content that's getting shared 80 million times, right? And the source of that content is all AI generated, then tapping into that source where I'm generating that AI is a learned language model based around the way that I crafted that content. If companies can source that information and tap into that, I guess, foundational piece on the AI side, now they can replicate that type of content, or at least control the type of content that I'm able to pump out to those same users.
Which takes us to the Elon Musk story out of Reuters.
Well, hang on. Michelle must have some valid points on.
I'm not
where
changing
all
the
this ends
topic.
up.
It's the same topic. I'm just saying it's the other argument.
Topic.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I was actually going to bring up, which I'd be surprised if you haven't seen that. So on Mother's Day, the Prince and Princess of Wales released a photograph of the Princess of Wales with the three children, supposedly taken by the Prince of Wales during this year. They didn't actually give more of a date than 2024. And at Adelaide Cottage, where they live in Windsor. And the not unusual for them on particular days, Mother's Day and birthdays and all of that stuff, to release photographs. So that's pretty, and they're a trusted agency in terms of, if Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace release a photo or information, then everyone at the first basis believes it to be true. Subsequently, as the Twitter sphere, does, they manipulated and looked at and assessed this particular photo and worked out that there were some inconsistencies with it. And after about 24 hours, the Princess of Wales came out and said that she had actually put it into Adobe and done some changing of the image. But the news agencies, Reuters and AP and that, killed the photograph. Now, apparently a kill claim for a photo is a very big thing in journalism. Essentially that means you shouldn't use the photo anymore, and people should remove it from their websites and all of that kind of stuff, because they believe that it was not a true image that was shared. Now, I kind of look at that with the second story and the first story a little bit, but it's an interesting correlation, I think, to actual images wholly created by AI. Now, she didn't actually necessarily create the photo by AI, but it looks like there was a bit of manipulation of maybe a couple of photographs being merged together and all of that kind of stuff. But what it means, though, is that now they're kind of on the, well, we need to double check everything they send list, and they're not trusted as much anymore. And for them, from a brand perspective, been a terrible few days for them. And, there's been all this speculation about how she is after her operation and all of that kind of stuff. And so this photograph was supposed to actually quell some of that stuff, when in actual fact, I think it's been shared like 80, 70, 80 million times, this image. And now it's had this, black mark, I guess you could say, put against it because it had been manipulated during using software like AI content is. And if you look at the picture that we're seeing here of the top lead of this story, is basically you could put anybody's face in that, couldn't you? And so what does that mean, particularly for you guys leading up into the, to the US election coming? And we've seen it before, haven't we? There's those photographs the other week of President Trump with, black people or Asian people, or, like that sort of stuff is going to happen. And, we've mentioned many times, and Mike is a big proponent of it, that, we need some kind of blockchain token symbol or some kind of stamp that can authenticate a photograph. And so it's just going to create so many more problems than we had before. We had all these little, tools everywhere.
You touched on the magic piece there, Michelle. It's the U.S. presidential election that's driving this. I personally, we're not a conspiracy corner yet, so leave your hats. But I do think there's an element of, you can't control the truth of the news, so you can, and then what you do is you undermine it. Like, people don't trust the news, but that's a fact. We know that. But the folks who make the news are pointing the finger that, hey, you can't always trust the news, because lately the news in America is not always what the mainstream media wants it to be. So I'm not saying,
but they spin it to the way they want it to be. So, like, manipulating images and things like that, this is well before AI is in the picture. This is just another means, to your point,
for sure,
on getting that component. Like, you take a picture of, you mentioned Rogan earlier. You take a picture of this guy, you slap a filter on it to make it look like he's death warmed over, and then you blast that out and saying he has COVID. You take a picture in December or whatever it was, or August in Oklahoma, for people standing online and claiming that they're in line for gunshot wounds, but they're all wearing, winter coats and scarves in August in Oklahoma. Like, the whole thing is just predicated on a narrative that they want to push, right? So, but to your point, yes, all of this is going to come around predicated around the election. And frankly, it's an unnecessary driving force that I feel is just another means to a power grab in this new mining of data on what we're going to source out as this AI content.
But you've always had this debate about what is truth. Like, what is the Wuhan lab leaks? 9/11 was an inside job. They're all conspiracies, but then some of them become true and some of them don't. My point is, the news organizations used to be able to tell you truth, and they can't anymore.
No, they didn't.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, they did.
No, they didn't. They told you a story. Okay, you had the opportunity to believe whether that story was accurate or not, but most people still didn't. You know, the landing on the moon was the largest watched live event in history, right? Or at least up until that time. Who knows? Maybe Kim Kardashian took over. But the point is that how many people were skeptical that even existed? Or that really happened. That wasn't necessary. I mean, it's true. We know that it really, but a lot of people didn't believe it.
But Mike, the mainstream media always would try to set the record straight. In that case, the Americans did land on the moon. In the case of did Donald Trump create a criminal act in fomenting rebellion? That's a debate. And my point is there's a truth and then there's the news.
Again, it's really migrated to more of an opinion piece than actually providing facts. And you can just look at the way that headlines are pronounced. One of the funniest things that you can do is just go into a newsstand or go into a store and just look at the same headline from two different perspectives, right? You know, if you cut through the fog of what this author is trying to make you believe based around reading his side of the story and get to the actual nuts and bolts, there are similarities, and that similarity is the truth. But again, I revert back to my previous comment. We're too damn lazy to read all of these verified processes and articles and information that's out there in order to cut through that fog.
That was always the case, though, Mike. Even when there was the 6 o'clock news back when your parents' generation, nobody went and verified what they were told online.
Of course not, because it didn't exist.
But the headline stuff and all that sort of thing now is just like above the fold in the old newspapers when they were broadsheets. You know, like if you wanted to have people have a particular opinion about things, then you have the big bold headline above the fold, and then the picture and the story starts. Most people never flipped it so that they read the rest of the story, but they looked at the headline that said moon landing a fake, for example, going on what we spoke about before, and they go, oh, I told you, I knew it. And because it kind of, that sort of thing also reinforces your inherent biases that you have. So, when I look at things on, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or whatever, when I look at those things, I read headlines and I think, oh, yeah, knew it, scroll on. But without even reading the thing. But that's because it's an internal bias that I have already, and the algorithm's feeding me and feeding that bias by giving me headlines of stuff.
So here's where I see it going. I'm going to make the prediction that, say, in 4 years' time, there will not be a single piece of content posted that isn't previously first listed on a blockchain somewhere so that it can be verified later. Meaning, if you can say whatever you want about Mark Angeles and Invictus, but if it's all completely on chain, I don't really care. Meaning, you're not going to be able to put out a false narrative.
Well, you still can, but you can authenticate where it comes from.
The concept of
the problem with that is, like, I agree with you. I think that's how it will be, and I think that that's what happened. But the 90-year-old watching something or reading something isn't going to be going, oh, I'm going to be checking the blockchain to make sure that that's real or not.
You will if it's about whether or not there was a revolution at your Congress.
Maybe.
When the Trade Center comes down and people say it was bombed and other people say it was airplanes, there's a place to go to check that.
Sure.
The Wuhan lab leak right now, I'm just picking crazy conspiracies, but like,
it's not conspiracy if it keeps coming true.
But I'm just trying, I don't want to debate the issue. I'm saying, like, Gulf of Tonkin, Vietnam, was the American ship attacked or not? These are types of things that when it's on chain, it's not debatable.
Okay, but you give this power of truth to something that just claims it's on chain. All the chain does is validate where the source of information comes from. It could still come from the same bullshit sources.
Yeah, but so what if I validate something on chain and it's not true?
Correct.
True, but I can at least assess the source then.
I get it,
right
it's
now,
no different from now. You're assessing the source by watching that same article on CNN versus on Fox.
Recently, Donald Trump put out an ad campaign about the White House as a as an old age retirement home, it was a shot at Joe Biden's age. And it comes from the Donald Trump campaign. Okay, now that I know that, I can clearly see the bias. I understand. That not being able to see the bias is an issue right now.
But somebody could have created that content that wasn't part of the campaign. It still would have had the same effect.
But I want to know if it's coming from, Joe Rogan, that the aliens use the pyramids for recharging, or if it's actually from the science organization that would know these things.
I get that, but the point I'm trying to make is that the blockchain itself is just a point of validation. It does not prove it true one way or another.
Agreed, but it gives me the ability to see where it's coming from.
But 90%, okay, maybe 70%, if I'm generous, 70% of people really don't care enough to work that out. Because when you've got your phone and you're scrolling through and you see a headline, you go, oh, yeah, I knew it, and you keep going. You're not going, I'm going to check if that's true or not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think the general people aren't going to do that. So there needs to be some, or there should be, probably needs is probably not the right word, but ultimately I think there's going to have to be something that in that instant tells us that it's validated or not. And I don't know what that is, and I don't know when that comes.
I think the severity of the issue will determine that, Michelle. So, for example, if the Princess of Wales had a little tummy tuck done or there's some plastic surgery and there's a debate around that, is one thing. Whether she's been, abducted by aliens is a totally different, very different. Yeah. So I want to know.
Either way, both of those pieces of content can be placed on chain.
Right. But at least I know the bias that I'm getting my news from. Right now, I don't. Where do memes come from? We all can think of the memes online. No one knows. They just show up.
People create them, and some of them go viral. Most of them don't.
People.
Clever, funny people.
If it's being created by the Donald Trump ad campaign or it's created by some 12-year-old, in middle school, I want to know.
Why? What difference does it make? If it gets you a chuckle, what's the
not?
Because in the case of memes, it's about comedy, but in the case of actual, news, I need to know the source, and that's becoming obfuscated.
Okay, so again, I'm going to keep pounding on this until I understand exactly what your point is on it, because again, if Fox News puts out an article, I'm assuming that source is Fox News. Right? If I go to the blockchain and it says, hey, Fox News put out the article, it's providing me the same bit of content. Now, is Fox News going to disclose their sourcing in an on-chain manner for me to verify? And am I going to go down a rabbit hole on every single news segment that I see out there? No, they're not going to disclose their sources. It's just another piece of validating where that information comes from. We're talking about news right now. Where the blockchain comes in for validation purposes is mostly going to be used in AI content. And I think that is what bridge we need to start building in order to reduce the gap between this AI generated content, which you and I can create right now, versus what information is actual and actually out there. So if I create an AI piece that has Joe Biden shaking hands with an alien, and I put it out there and it goes nuts and everybody's like, I told you so. The conspiracy, Joe Rogan is trying to book Biden to see what the experience. The bottom line is people can source me back using an on-chain initiative and see where that content was generated from.
So I'll tell you a 10-second story and it'll make my point. Years ago, I had an article published in Bloomberg from when I was in Wall Street. I never sent it to Bloomberg. That article was lifted from Bloomberg from another trade publication that'll remain nameless that took it from my LinkedIn without telling me. My point is that whole chain of ownership, I know because I wrote the article, but if it was something serious, like whether there was a revolution in American Congress and people don't know where the news source came from, now it spreads. Now you have the issue of, what is it they say, that rumor makes it around the world before truth gets its shoes on, something like that.
Yeah.
You can,
and I think though too, I mean, that happens now anyway. You mean I'm in some writing groups and some blogging groups and stuff like that, and people complain all the time about how new bloggers have come on and they've totally stolen their entire stories and reproduced them on their blogs on their own, and that's not using AI tools or anything like that at all.
Forever.
Yes.
This is
yeah,
nothing
forever.
new.
Yeah.
But
If
now we
you
have a
look-
technology solution.
Look at any article that's out there. Every single article that's out there posted on a particular page is sourced from somewhere else.
All right. Part of that, though, this is Musk's solution, that XAI open sources the Grok code, and his goal is, quote, to create a maximum truth-seeking AI. So the AI itself now, instead of blockchain verification, which we're talking about at the moment, the AI itself will then come up with what it believes is the truth. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, we had this last discussion last week, didn't we, about the oxymoron of Elon being the teller of truth and the upholder of moral standards in the world. Isn't the EU haven't the EU currently threatened him that if he doesn't clean up the misinformation on X, Twitter, by, is it the end of the quarter or the end of the month? And, like Twitter might be banned from the whole of the EU, so 27 different countries. Yeah, look, I think it's great that it's open source. That'll be good. But as to Elon being the
arbiter of
flag
truth.
bearer for this movement.
For all of his faults or any business person's faults, I'd rather have that than the government. Any government, EU, US, doesn't matter. Tell us, at some point, the CCP, like, this is what the news is. There were books written about this. So I get nervous. I'd rather have truth in the hands of myself. I will decide, even though I only have an 8-second attention span, and I may think, and I may make crazy determinations. Right? TikTok is getting banned potentially in America, by the way, because partly the news things. And again, I do believe this connects back to the U.S. presidential election, the timing of this all. But
that's been going on for years now, threatening. The threat of that.
It's now finally getting traction because something's going to happen in November. Anyway, I think it's interesting. I think this debate, this is the free speech thing that we've seen in traditional media playing out digitally, is my opinion. It's kind of what I wrote in the intro. And I feel like people need to be aware that truth, at some point, you either have to verify it, the source on chain, or have your own LLM that's going to help you decide truth. My opinion. What do you guys think? Am I crazy?
No. But again, when is truth subjective?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So then if that's the case, can you train something to create the truth as you see it in your world?
Yes, I can give it my own bias.
Okay. So then what's the difference?
I mean, if you've ever done any reading around accident investigation where there are 5 witnesses to something that happened,
it's great,
and the police individually interview each of those 5 people, none of the stories of those people are always identical. So sure, they go, oh, the person was running and the car was going too fast and they hit them. But then it would be, no, the person stopped. Someone will say the person stopped. And then someone will say, oh, so-and-so on the pavement tripped them. Someone's, so even though they've all witnessed the exact same event,
they've done studies on this.
Truth-telling, retelling of it is never, ever identical or the same.
Correct. And there's also, okay, now, are we sure we're not in our conspiracy corner yet?
Let's go on that
way. The ability to manipulate actual content that people can see with their own 2 eyes is also subjected to invalid truth as well. So that same example that you provided, if there's a video that's edited and it shows this person tripping somebody, or he tripped over a fire hydrant, maybe somebody was in the way of the fire hydrant, and from that guy's perspective, it looked like he tripped over that. Like, there's a million different ways to not only manipulate the storytelling component of it, which humans have been doing and lying about since the beginning of time, but now we have the ability to craft the visual context of it. And again, when you don't have the time or interest to look deeper down the surface level title or image of what you see, that's the perception of what you have on that event.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the problem here, isn't it? The problem with what we're going through now, what we will go through leading up to the election for you guys and afterwards with AI and all of this stuff, is that people have to want to understand if it's truthful or not. And I think that the don't give a you know what meter of a lot of people is pretty low these days.
That's the same as it's
And
always been. I
I
agree
think
with
it's
you,
even
Michelle.
worse now than it used to be.
I think when the issue is important enough, people will care, and otherwise they just don't have the bandwidth. They've got real life going on.
Some people will care.
Yeah.
Well,
All
they
right.
People
won't
like
care
us,
only
that we
because
read all the stuff and whatever. We care, but I can tell you, like my parents or other people that I know, even other like other parents of our generation, half of them are just too busy trying to get through every day of their own lives to bother about this stuff. There's a lot of people in a
100%,
lot of
but
stress right now.
and why is that? And then when they start asking the question of why, that's when the interest level on some of these other topics come about. Why am I paying $8 for a carton of eggs now? Like why is gas at $4 a gallon? Like,
The Federal Reserve.
These whatever the answer is, this piques that interest level. While I agree with you, your world is within the four walls of your house. And if you keep that in order, then the world around you is a much better place. Right. And, if everybody had that same mentality, everybody would be focused on, perfecting their own little world. The world would ultimately become a little bit better. But there's also the source of having a phone in your face 18 hours a day with whatever content you're being, thrown at you, and you can't escape it, whether it's cultural, whether it's news related, whether it's sports. There's always going to be some sense of indication, meme, pun, something thrown out there that has an impact on you trying to understand what is real, what's not, and then sourcing out some of that other information.
I think that this comes full circle eventually to the blockchain conversation for sourcing. I know it doesn't determine truth, but it does help you understand bias. And I also think that these two competing ways, there's a lot more that's going to happen before this plays out. The election is forcing the issue, but this is more complex than just a few months and this is fixed. So we got to get used to this.
Sure.
I'm going to take us to story number 2, if that's all right with you guys. Invented the blockchain.
Really story 2.
Oh, story 3?
Didn't we do 3 stories in that thing? I've already posted all of them.
That's the whole AI thing. In the blockchain side of the world, Goldman Sachs and others test Wall Street blockchain network. So for those who are not following this, traditional finance, investment banking, Wall Street has been building a blockchain so that they can trade financial instruments on chain. Right now, they don't, obviously. It's all done through centralized stock exchanges. Goldman Sachs, BNY Mellon, and Cboe Global, which is the Chicago Board of Options, has tested a blockchain-based communication called Canton Network. We've discussed this previous. This involves multiple firms and banks. Canton is an, quote, interoperable blockchain network designed for institutional assets, end quote. It launched last May, and for those who aren't from the Wall Street world, the way Wall Street works right now, you buy and sell things, and there's a central clearinghouse that matches this all up at the end of the day. The government runs it, the American government for the most part in this country. And so they have that on a global scale as well for international settlements for banking, the Bank of International Settlements. And the concept is blockchain is so much more efficient and effective as a business tool, but Wall Street doesn't control the decentralized finance thing. So they're building a centralized blockchain for trading of all financial assets eventually is the goal. Canton was designed by Microsoft. And so right now, the big institutional players are testing it. Thoughts on this one? Mike, we'll start with you, Mr. Blockchain. Is this good, bad? Do you think this is something that is are they just trying to glom, or is this something that we should be paying attention to?
I mean, we should definitely be paying attention to anything that they try to sink their teeth into on chain related activities, especially if it requires any sort of modicum of control that they can get their hands on.
I'm smelling conspiracy corner here.
Grimy little thing.
Sorry, I couldn't. I didn't expect.
I thought we had this really funny thing. I thought, what am I going to do if I don't wear my crown? And so what about this? Does that look good?
Are you cooking soup?
It was a rice cooker.
Going into World War I? I don't know. Uh,
Mike's going over the wall, guys.
so I lost my train of thought, but the
Anything they sink their teeth into, you said. Sorry, that's what
yes,
triggered this whole
so
thing.
anything they can sink their teeth into for control. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting that is not part of this, but it kind of links up to everything we talked about today. The analysis of where all of these transactions go is going to be an AI generated piece, right? The AI is going to be able to, do that reconciliation at the end of every day. It's going to be able to do it in very fast time. And it's also going to be able to validate those transactions that are embedded here on this chain. Now, what does that do for the regulatory commission and the government? I hope it dissolves it.
No. They're going to control it, and then they have full visibility into what's gotten traded, what gets taxed, who owns what.
Well, again, you don't need all the people to police that if you have these AI sources that are doing that job for you.
It's not about employment. It's about who has the insight into visibility into the information.
Well,
meaning
again,
the government would then.
chain.
So right now, the way you buy and sell stuff, you buy and sell, and then the centralized authority, which is the exchange, has to report that to the government, and there's a whole big chain of command there. Blockchain would allow them to just be instantaneous control.
And AI could be built to monitor that chain, is my point.
Right.
Yes.
Which eliminates who from the equation?
Well, the exchanges, for sure.
Well, the security of those exchanges.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about all the entire infrastructure of Wall Street would be overturned as all assets.
I disagree. I think that the Wall Street can easily continue utilizing this new technology.
Oh, it'll continue.
It just won't be the governing body that will change.
I agree with that. The distinction I want to draw and why I feel this is a conspiracy corner topic is centralized blockchain for trading securities duplicates what's already working just fine in the decentralized world for 15 years, by the way.
Correct. Except that it will add more onboarding initiatives, which means more people will be able to trade on those platforms, which benefits who?
Well, Wall Street.
Well, it benefits everybody that's trading there now. I
agree with you. So you're talking about the efficiency play. I'm talking about the control aspect.
Okay. Again, assuming that blockchain still runs its course and that control is just not part of the equation. You can play in the sandbox, but doesn't mean you own it. And again, if these guys want to create these fictitious things like these futures and, all these things that we've discussed here before, and try to maintain control that way, go ahead. But you're dealing in a different playground right now.
So I forgot the news story, but Charles Hoskinson Cardano recently made a comment around how blockchain is evolving in a way that centralized control is creeping in. He doesn't like it. And so I feel like Wall Street...
We've been talking about that for 6 months, 12 months.
Wall Street clearly wants to get their mitts on this because there's money that they're not capturing in the DeFi world. And that's what I think this is.
You can slap a new label on it, call it DeFi, but you're still controlling it, right? So take this example as proof of that. They're going to build something, quote unquote, on chain. On chain has a decentralized element and feel to it. But if they build the blockchain themselves, guess what they control?
That's not DeFi though, Mike. I agree with you. I sound like I'm arguing, but I'm not. We agree. The decentralized aspect goes away once it becomes centralized. And Wall Street is nothing but centralization.
But again, it's only limited to what they can control. In this case, their own chain.
But if you're forcing everything onto that chain, like if the Canton Network is the only place to buy and sell stocks.
But it doesn't have to be, is the point.
But it will be if it's run by the guys that make the money from doing it.
I'm saying that the technology is available so that it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I agree.
So I did some digging into the digital asset people who are helping them running the blockchain. They have got a very large number of very big names that are working with them. So it's not just the 2 or 3 different ones that they talk about in this story. There are many of the banks. There's the Deloittes of this world. There's the Deutsche Börse Group. There's Morgans. There's
it's international.
ABN AMRO. Yeah, it's everything. But then it goes to things like Samsung or like other sort of Citibank. Those sorts of businesses as well. So that group, NASDAQ, Versana, so that this particular company are working or have pulled in a large number of what you would say in the traditional sort of world as trusted institutions, wouldn't you? You put your money into them and they kind of look out or look after it. So, from that point of view, it's something to take seriously because like we've been talking a long time, haven't we, about how, in the early days when, are such and such going to get their own blockchain, or, what are they doing with this, etc. And we've talked about various different businesses over the past, 70 episodes. But for all of them to go all in with one particular company helping them with the blockchain stuff, like it is about control, and it will be about them pooling and centralizing all of that financial stuff to this one area, which then, as Mike, I'm sure will argue, means it's not decentralized anymore, because it'll all be revolving around that one blockchain that they've created and that they control.
Which is the George Orwell 1984 doublespeak of crypto is no longer what it was. It's still crypto, but it's not. They call it DeFi, but it's decentralized finance inherently means it's got none of the banks involved. That was the purpose of the whole thing.
And it still could be that way. Again, they're not controlling the technology. They're just building another piece of it and claiming it's the only one.
Yeah.
Right. So what you would have ultimately is all assets on chain, on the Canton chain happening that's been under the centralized control. Bitcoin obviously would still be doing its thing because it's got no one runs it. And then that's basically two competing systems that would just play out over time.
But again, anybody can build another one, right? It's just a matter of the traction. I mean, why can't the Bitcoin model be replicated?
Because the scale of it that's already been achieved over 15 years would be very difficult to recreate again, unless you had all the major players working together, which is what this Canton thing has done.
Okay, so, and it's very possible, especially if there's a lot of money flowing into it. But if there's no marketplace because a marketplace already exists, they're just building something that they can play with themselves.
Yeah, the factor that we're not bringing into this, and we've raised it many times in this program, previous listeners will know, is the onboarding difficulty for DeFi, right? You need a wallet, you need to figure out seed phrase, all that stuff goes away when it's centralized. Canton makes it back to the banking system of just remember your password, 1, 2, 3, exclamation point, you're in. So that's the onboarding factor will drive growth of the Canton network.
But it will also grow the other side of this as well. And again, if this leads to that digital hardware implementation of a wallet being incorporated in your smartphone the next time you go buy one, or in your laptop the next one that you end up buying or upgrading with, that doesn't necessarily help their cause. It helps everybody's cause as part of the technology. It helps Bolt Plus's cause because now people can interact with that chain. I agree. The phone I buy from Apple that comes preloaded with the wallet that you're describing in the future is going to have the Canton network embedded.
Yeah,
maybe.
That's what I think too.
It's very possible. And again, as long as that is that onboarding, like most phones in Africa come with Facebook embedded already, right? I mean, it's the exact same concept. Now, just because they have that technology, are they prohibited from going to Twitter or another competing?
I can recreate the wheel if I'm tech savvy. If I'm you, Mike, I might want to go and then reload my phone with the proper wallet that I really think it should have a Ledger, Trezor, or whatever. But
it's about information, right? Yep. It's about the access and content on how the technology works. Right now, that's minuscule as part of the mass population is concerned. If this is an effort to help educate and bring people into the actual space, now you're talking about an opportunity that opens up for businesses. We talk about businesses and applications on different blockchains that are available. Now, if everybody has access to a wallet, now it opens the door for you to do other things that are off of that Canton network. And people will have the ability to do it because they have access to it.
So for those who don't trade crypto, and this is not a crypto show, they may not be aware that oftentimes if you want to go to a centralized exchange like Coinbase, they can limit whether or not you purchase that crypto based on your regional location. So if you're in New York City or you're outside of New York City, it matters. They will or won't let you buy the crypto.
Well, that's why Binance got into trouble, wasn't it?
because they weren't enforcing that. And
Yes.
so the point is that becomes a very easy switch to flip once it's all on the same network. Everything is all there. That's
But
the
again,
concern.
if you understand the technology, and we're separating ourselves from the control from the technology, because controlling the technology, there's no bridge there, right? You can't do that. And I think that, the more the technology gets out there, the more people will understand that, right? So I mean, I was at my my friend's kids' first birthday party this past weekend, and people were talking about block talk.
We love.
Oh, every time I talk about something that's important, I get cut out. Somebody is clearly watching me.
There's a giant wall switch. They just pull.
Conspiracy. Quick,
shut
where's
them
that
down.
conspiracy corner button?
Shut them down. No, I mean, I was at a party this weekend, and I was talking to a few people that didn't really understand blockchain, but they heard enough about it so that they can hold a conversation. And when you break it down, they really didn't truly understand how the system works and how the decentralized element is operational. Right? They think of it as just another software that's uploaded into their phone. And to an extent, they're right. But when you break it down in the technological factor, I don't care if you have all the power of Wall Street and all the hedge funds in the world. You're not controlling the technology side of this.
They don't understand the concept of nodes and independent verification. Well,
they can't control that element of it. You can try to build your own chain, and by all means, I encourage that. Right? Build your own sandbox. Have unique use cases for that particular chain. This is something that was mentioned on this show. I think episode 2. Different chains are going to serve different purposes. And if this Canton network serves a specific purpose, great. But more importantly, if it onboards people into the technological aspect of this and it opens the door for them to enter different highways, then all the better, because now you're talking about mass adoption of the technology itself.
I think the Canton network's purpose is to undermine DeFi.
Well, Spanner's put in the Bolt chat, interesting thought that if there's only one blockchain, is it still decentralized?
Nope.
and he thinks it sounds like something like Confucius GPT might answer.
Spanner's put his finger on it. Spanner, as always, you're spot on. It is their version of centralizing what's gone on underneath their nose, and they weren't able to get any money from that. All the trading that's gone on for 15 years.
That's right. And they're not doing it out of their good grace. They're doing it because they want the money. They're not happy with how much money they haven't made over the past 5 years.
That's it.
So we are in conspiracy corner. So I'm just going to throw this out there. If AI is, this new trend on where things are going, and Wall Street is, let's call it a thing in the past of the way that, organizations need to maintain control, why is it taking so long for OpenAI or any sort of AI generated piece to generate their own blockchain?
OpenAI is an appendage of Microsoft, which is an appendage of big tech, which is an appendage of the U.S. control of finance.
Again, if you want to talk about
blockchain.
Well, this is the seeds that we plant here on a show like this and sort of watch blossom over time. Are they behind the curve on a lot of those types of initiatives because of what on-chain, control factors they can build with their own on-chain activity? Getting the source of those open AI, like everything we talked about at the beginning of the show, becomes a solution. But if they control that chain.
But Mike, just because the tech can do it, this gets to intent. What is the purpose that they're trying to work towards? Money.
Again, if this new source of AI, and this is my, conspiracy prediction from this show, like this is how I'm going to wrap up everything that we discussed here today. The new currency in data mining is going to be the source of open AI and AI generated content. And if that has a monetary value to it, there's a benefit to control where that source is generated from. And there's an on-chain initiative that can help make that happen.
I believe it was the British band The Who coined the term, Pete Townsend, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. All right, I'm going to wrap up a quick summary here. Fake news, AI, and blockchain. We discussed this today. 3 stories that we tied together. Proliferating news sites spewing AI-generated fake stories. On the one side of that debate, big firms like Microsoft, Adobe are coming up with ways to verify the content's authenticity. On the other side of that, Elon Musk wants to make an open source AI that just helps you find your own truth. Secondarily from that, Goldman Sachs and others are testing a Wall Street blockchain network that we seem to believe here in Conspiracy Corner is designed to undercut and revert what's happened in the decentralized finance world. That is our recap on the stories today. Quick final thoughts before we wrap us out, Michelle?
Watch this space. How many episodes of talking about AI are we up to? My 40 is in the bag, I'm telling you.
I mean, we're not cherry picking these articles and these stories because we want that tick, right?
No.
Like these are things that are actually happening and in the news cycle. So, you know, we're very accurate with the way that these predictions are playing out. And again, it's not difficult to understand that when we play in this all day, every day. And that's really a testament of the work that we put into preparing for the show, but, you know, more importantly, applying this in our real world careers. So my recap on all this is wishing you both a belated happy birthday from last week. And, you know, hope you guys had a good one. And, you know, I'll end on that.
That's great. Yeah, we're here every Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. We discuss the business side of blockchain and how it's changing the world. This is your weekly insight into the digital media revolution. You can find Business on the Block on YouTube and on Twitter, which is nice. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. We'll be back next week. Feel free to drop any comments in the socials.
One more comment. I'm going to ask your mom or, you know, your hospital that you were born at to put your birth certificate on chain so I can verify it.
Right.
Obama's got that taken care of already.
It could have been fake information.
Last week on Wednesday, it was Mark's birthday and he never let anybody know. So we really should have played like a happy birthday thing or something.
You know,
happy birthday for last Wednesday.
After age 21, the next big bus stop is what, like 65, and then you get what, death? Pretty much.
I'm not counting my age anymore. I've decided. I was a bit shocked by this birthday, so I'm like, oh God.
Well, in this country, you could still become president.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm young when it comes to being president.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Bye.
Oh, wait, actually, Michelle, you'll be proud of me. I'm remembering our outro.